Amanda, thank you very much. You can continue.
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to join us for the CESA's final Engineering and Technology Innovation Forum webinar for this year. My name is Amanda Masondo Mkize from MPA Mods, and I will be the facilitator for today's session. So CESA's Engineering and Technology Innovation Forum aims to promote innovation and provide an idea platform and a free space for CESA members to share knowledge and formulate new innovation solutions. The forum has hosted a number of webinars during the course of 2023 to promote just that. So today we zoom in on asset management, a field that is rapidly gaining momentum due to the realization of importance, particularly when it comes to accountability and maintenance of infrastructure. And today we discuss an integrated approach to physical asset management, which is critical for the business and organizations seeking to streamline operations, reduce costs, and extend the lifespan of their assets. Our first presenter will discuss the advantages, challenges, and best practices of implementing integrated technologies in the context of physical asset management. And then our second presentation will provide us with an understanding of the requirements and integration challenges for the Assets Intelligence Network, supporting rail maintenance operations, as well as an overview of Assets Intelligence Networks for the Metropolitan of Atlanta Transit Authority. We will then have a question and answer session where I ask you to please engage with our presenters, and you're also welcome to post questions and comments in the chat box. Please allow me now to introduce our first speaker. He holds a BEng Honours in Industrial Engineering. He's a registered professional engineer and a certified asset management assessor. He's also an accredited machinery and technical specialities asset valuer. His presentation today is titled Integrated in Asset Management, Technology, Value and Optimization. Please welcome Andile Gwebu. And Andile, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes, you are.
Thank you. So I'd like to quickly share my screen. I need to swap the screens again. Please, Amanda, let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Well, we can see your screen. Just, I think you switched to presenter mode.
Mode. And just swap the screens around. Okay, all right.
There we go. Thanks.
Just this way. Thank you for the introduction, Amanda, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining our webinar. I'll take you through an integration in asset management, just having a high-level discussion on technology, value, and optimization around physical asset management. So essentially, the scope of asset management entails the ability to create a line of sight between an organization's strategic plan and the various elements that speak to organization and people, strategic planning within the organization, asset management decision-making, the risk processes, and the ability to then integrate everything around asset information. And in all of that, the most critical element is to be able to fully articulate and understand and note all relevant asset information. Because ultimately, you cannot manage what you can't measure, and you cannot really manage what you don't know. So asset information becomes quite critical in your ability to then acquire, operate, maintain, and dispose of assets. And all of that, linking it back to the organization's strategic plan, feeds into the desires of customers, legislation, investors, and the customer environment. So I'll take you through the integration challenges and the key benefits and requirements around how all of this can be basically brought together through the asset management conceptual model. So typically, most organizations face the challenges in asset management, and the challenges are relating to asset data. If you look in the municipal context, a lot of municipalities struggle with managing their assets or even noting what their assets are, and that creates challenges with regards to be it maintaining the assets or also reporting from a asset management context around those assets. And hence the big fuss from and the big focus from the Auditor General around asset management and asset management findings in municipalities, because asset data is not adequately and fully captured. And this also then links to financial models, because if you don't have adequate asset data, you can't really be able to put the appropriate financial models to those assets. And also you can't be able to allocate the appropriate valuation models to those assets, manage the risk around the assets, and also execute maintenance and work management practices that result in organizational effectiveness. And typically what you want to have is real-time access to high-quality asset data, alignment to industry best practices around asset data, which speaks to your asset 55,000 ISO 55,000 standard, which is the ISO standard for asset management, the city infrastructure development management systems for asset management, which are developed in South Africa, and the GRAP standards that speak to more on an accounting and financial compliance framework. And you want to have a specialized industry-wide financial and technical models around your assets that specifically speak to this to the assets that you have. And that enables you to have a full picture and a full end-to-end approach to your asset management functionality. But really, how do you do all of that, and how do you achieve all of that? And the truth is, it's a balancing act. There are constantly conflicting drivers around the execution of a fully fledged asset management function. And while you want to achieve full asset performance from an engineering perspective, you also have to think about the cost to how that can be attained. But also you want to also think about the risks around all those operations. And really, asset management is a balancing act between the three drivers: performance, cost, and risks. And you want to be able to try and manage all the resource constraints that improve to enable you to improve the performance of your assets. So I'll take you through the value aspect of it around asset management. So every CFO's burden is to be able to report on the return on investment for their assets. So ultimately, organizations will want to put capex forward for assets over, say, a 30-year period that they want to expand their operations. But all of that has to speak to the bottom line and speak to the return on investment and for those capital expenditures around assets. And they want to ensure, the typical CFO will want to ensure that the organization spending on assets provides sufficient returns and contributes to overall financial health of an organization. So if a mining operation decides to invest in the underground load and or over the ground load and haul equipment that would carry the ore from the surface, they want to know that those assets that they're investing in will generate value to the organization, and for those assets to generate value, their longevity is quite critical. They have to reach their expected useful life, and they have to perform at an optimum level of performance. So that takes us back to the drivers. Now you have the cost side of it, and then you also have the performance side of it. But in all of that, as you're operating your assets, you're operating in a risk environment, you're operating in a normal world environment, and that comes with its own risks and its own challenges. And typically, your assets go through various asset life cycle changes, and all of these are framed from an OPEX and CAPEX activity perspective. So the life cycle strategies and plans comprise of those OPEX and CAPEX activities. So for instance, if you are it's a new asset establishment, the identification viability configuration process can be an OPEX activity, but the preparation and design of the contract and implementation becomes a CAPEX activity, And then once all of that is done, it becomes an operation maintenance, which is an OPEX activity. So cost is always at the center of all of this. And once you've handed over the assets to operation maintenance, you now have to think about throughout the life of the assets, how do you renew and upgrade the performance of those assets to ensure that they reach their useful life. So a typical example would be for a solar farm. At year 10 of a solar farm, you have to change the inverter, or you have to change the inverter for those batteries for it to reach its useful life of 25 years. So you have to constantly be thinking about the cost drivers and the cost investments that you have to put into your assets for them to reach their useful life and generate value throughout their life. And that speaks to whether it's new establishment of assets, existing assets renewal or upgrading, or component renewal cycles throughout the life cycle of the assets. And ultimately, once all of that is done and you've reached the full life of your assets, you then take them through to a decommissioning phase or a restoration, should there be any value that you can still extract from those assets. And really then, what is value from a CFO's perspective, from an asset management perspective? So from a cost and value perspective, you want to be able to do your financial planning and budgeting around your assets, which is aligning the investments with the overall financial strategy of the organization. For instance, what is the overall strategy with regards to expansion of an organization? If the organization has a plan to expand its mining operations, say for another 50 or 20 years, at what stage of the life cycle are the assets, and what new assets need to be procured to ensure that the organization can continuously generate value for its investors for that next 50-year period in its financial strategy and its overall financial forecast. And in all of that, you want to be able to still be reporting from a financial reporting and compliance perspective, because once you spend money from investors, you want to comply to your accounting and reporting regulations, and also you want to be able to comply to the accounting frameworks. And this is your IFRS or your GRAB requirements in the South African context. And all of that speaks to proper documentation of asset values, depreciation of assets, and impairment is quite critical for the financial transparency and regulatory compliance of your assets, and the risk management aspect of it. And really, risk management speaks to any unforeseeable risks. For instance, the floods that happened in Durban, organizations had to be prepared for and be covered around those risks, around the floods, etc. And these can be unforeseen risks and also foreseen risks pertaining to the operations of the assets. And that speaks to the value that you have to think about in an organization to enable to mitigate those risks. And this really includes risks related to asset value fluctuations, technological obsolescence, regulatory changes, and potential disruptions to operations, foreseen and unforeseen. So, for instance, in a mining operation, if your bone mill fails, you have a total disruption to operation. So you have to think about those risks and how you mitigate them. And this speaks to how you then optimize your operations around managing your value and your risks. So optimization around asset management, we need to then look at what are the optimization components from an asset management perspective. And the starting point from an optimization is your asset strategy. You need to develop and implement a comprehensive asset strategy that aligns to organizational goals. I think that takes us back to the initial graphic where I showed the overview and the scope of asset management, that alignment between the organizational goals and the asset management function. And then you want to optimize your maintenance functionality by balancing your predictive, preventive, and corrective maintenance activities, but also tailoring those maintenance activities to the specific needs and critical assets. And organizations need to identify assets that are quite critical to their operations, and understanding that not all assets are equally as important or as critical. Where some assets, should they fail, they lead to total stoppage and interruption of services throughout the organization. And also some assets may fail, but operations may still continue. So, and maintenance optimization approach needs you to identify and allocate the right maintenance activities to the most critical assets within the organization. And then all of that then leads to also inventory management, where inventory management speaks to an optimized approach to spare parts and inventory. And really from a value and an optimization perspective, that speaks to understanding that generally you want to have a certain amount of spares in stock for your critical assets should they fail, and ensure that you keep operations going. But at the same time, there is that balance to say allocating a lot of money to those assets that stay in your inventory repository, while you could allocate it and unlock those funds for other operational issues. So that really, that balance has to go through an optimal and critical spare parts thinking that enables you to minimize your carrying costs on your spares, but also be able to have an optimum spare parts inventory that speaks to your critical assets, that you need to ensure that should they fail, you're readily able to bring them back to service. And that can be enabled through data-driven decision making, and that power can be enabled through leveraging data analysis and performance metrics to enable you to make informed decision. And that really speaks to the technology integration aspect that I'm going to take you through briefly towards the end of the presentation. And while all of that is being brought together through optimization, one of the most important and quite critical aspects is the collaboration across organizational departments. The focus on asset management should be creation of a one organization approach to managing your assets and your operations, and all of that being centered around the performance and functionality of the assets. So you want to focus all your operations around the assets based on a one organization approach, ensuring that all departments speak the same language around the focus on the operation and functionality and performance of the assets within the organization. So in a siloed environment where you have siloed asset management, it inhibits fully optimization and optimized decision-making, movement in information, execution of best practices. So for instance, if you have siloed data, you have siloed stakeholders who manage the real estate and infrastructure assets, you have siloed management of IT assets, you have siloed management of facilities assets, and siloed management of other departmental assets, and information is in separate departments. You can't really bring everything together to optimize the cost aspects, the risk aspects, and also the performance of assets, because everyone is reporting based on their functions and their separate department perspectives on the assets, and that really then doesn't create that one perspective and one view, and leads to scenarios where organizations will have different reporting parameters, reporting frameworks, and you then can't have a consistent view on the value that you're generating with your assets. You can't have a consistent view on the life cycle of your assets and the replacement profiling of your assets. And that really inhibits the entire focus of an integrated approach and focus around asset management. But then what does an optimized operation really look like? And one of the easiest ways of showing what an optimized operation looks like is the mine to market value chain. So for a mine to market value chain, for it to happen, you have to have all the various steps and processes in line throughout the value chain steps, in line and in sync, to ensure that you extract your minerals with your assets at the beginning. You're able to process your raw materials with your operational assets. You're able to manage your inventory. You're able to move the assets from the operations. You're able to move the minerals or materials from your operations to the ports. You're able to move the stockpile at the ports onto the vessels, and also deliver all of that to the customer. So you want to be able to move across all the different stages of the value chain without major asset failures, operational disruptions, and being able to send data across the various units seamlessly across that value chain in each step. That basically is a high-level picture of what an optimized asset management operation would look like. That seamless step-to-step move from your mine to market, without interruptions and disruptions across the value chain, but also being able to link those interdependent steps and corresponding activities as they function with enabled asset performance and application and usage of those assets across those steps that is not disturbed and uninterrupted, so that all of it happens seamlessly, and the asset and the materials that are mined at the beginning are delivered to the market at the end of the entire value chain. So how then do you achieve integration in asset management? So integration in asset management is bringing together the full asset lifecycle activities. And these asset lifecycle activities are your asset creation, your operations, maintenance, and utilization management, as well as disposal activities. So from the beginning, when you design your asset and hand over to operations and maintenance and utilization of the asset, all the way up until you dispose of your asset. And all of this, for it to be integrated and to function fully and right across, you want to be able to have the right decision-making methods across the life cycle of the asset and manage all the risks appropriately. And what is quite important for all of that to happen is your technology implementation. And we believe that for you to be able to do that and bring that integration across, you have to enable you have to have a well-oiled maintenance control function, which is enabled by skilled engineers and technicians, an integrated contractor management approach, and an optimized work management process. And you want to have your reliability-based maintenance function, which is well defined by the appropriate equipment best practices, standard operating procedures, and intelligent maintenance practices, and the application of software applications and tools that enable that integration. And basically the software applications that allow you to automate your assets, integrate work management processes, allow you to be able to do effective data analysis and employ the various tools around artificial intelligence, and also execute process-built and bespoke specific cloud services that enable the functionality and integration of your asset management service. So if you look at the graphic there, your integration basically would be the various elements of your maintenance control function, your reliability maintenance, your reliability-based maintenance approach, and the software applications, all of that interlinking through work management, automation, and contract management, where you have contractors and external service providers enabling the functionality around your asset management focus, and the overall goal being elimination of failures and delays, improve asset performance, and reduce total cost of facilities and asset management. So from that picture that we had from a siloed asset management perspective, this is what it believe it will look like from an integrated or enterprise asset management system where integration is in place. So you have your enterprise asset management system in the middle, where you have your work management processes in place, your operations data, your standard operation procedures, policies, etc. You have your asset portfolio data, there your financial reporting and forecast for your budgeting and financial management cycles, performance and monitoring and reporting functionalities in there, and what is the contracts and service level agreements with external service providers. And what then the enterprise asset management system then does is it then brings management, finance teams, project management, work management, and operations personnel, contractors, and all the relevant stakeholders all together into that one asset management and one that's centered in integrated asset management view and perspective, all centered around your assets, around your asset processes, and your reporting frameworks, performance management reporting, and ultimately taking you through an effective process of managing all the stakeholders, the assets, and the various elements that speak to the value around the organization, the risk management frameworks, as well as the performance of the assets, all together in one asset management view. And really the benefits of integration would be an enhanced operational efficiency, increased asset resilience, extended asset lifespan, improve planning and budgeting around your assets because you have that centralized view on your assets across the different divisions. You have cost reduction around an improved and optimized approach towards the management of your assets, increase accountability and transparency due to the better movement of assets around, a better movement of information around your assets across the different departments, your organization, from the inventory management to your operations and also to your finance departments, and also better risk management because everyone has a better view around your assets through that integrated framework and integrated perspective around the assets and the asset management functionality. I think that takes it to the end of my presentation. I'll hand over back to you, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andile. I think we can all agree that that was quite a great presentation. And thank you for highlighting how critical asset management is as a component of our industry and organizations. And also just highlighting the roles that all the stakeholders have to play in this asset management. So as mentioned in the beginning, we will have the opportunity after our next presentation to post questions and answers, and then we can engage in a dialogue with our speakers. So without further ado, our second presentation will be done by John Burney. He is a principal consultant at Hatch Digital and Global Director of Asset Intelligence at Hatch. John will highlight understanding the integration challenges and requirements for the Asset Intelligence Network, supporting rail maintenance operations. His presentation is titled Asset Intelligence Network for the Metropolitan of Atlanta Transit Authority. I'll hand over to you, John, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Andele's presentation is well aligned with mine. Great job. I'm encouraged by the skill set, the presentation skills of this next generation. So great job, sir. Let me share my screen. I'll start this presentation. I'm going to start with a quick safety share. We'll dive into kind of the asset management with the end in mind, move towards a kind of a digital perspective of that, and then the actual project example they're going to share with you today. And Tavit's presentation was a great description of the why and some frameworks around how do you execute on asset management systems. This presentation is going to dive into a project example on the how and how some of those technology stacks are put together to deliver that function. Safety share. We always like to start presentations with a brief safety share. This being a presentation focused on digital solutions. I like this one. This is a wearable biometric device that actually will identify to the wearer their cognitive state. It's really tailored for situations where someone's going into a confined space or a dangerous situation where they need to be quite aware. And this gives the wearer some feedback of their physical state and cognitive state to make sure that they're ready for that task. So very interesting technology that can be applied to safety. Asset intelligence. This is a term that we've been using for quite some time. It really is the destination. It's bringing together all of those layers of information, the data, the real-time data sets, the historical data sets, many of the different software applications, and connecting that into an ecosystem where we can pull from that data sets, build digital twins for more advanced analyses, and also connect workers to digitally to that kind of information. But it always has to be aligned with your business drivers and goals of your asset management system. There's many components to this. There's many systems and processes and drivers within this ecosystem, and they all have to connect and interrelate. The reliability-centered maintenance programs, if you're moving towards predictive maintenance, there's many functions and components of all of these applications, and they have to all work together to deliver that asset performance ecosystem. What does asset intelligence look like from a digital perspective? It really is about the data and the applications using that data set as part of an asset intelligence network. Asset accounting done in ERP systems. You really need to identify the systems of record, the division of responsibilities of the data layered onto the technology stacks. Asset accounting system is going to be looking after those financial components that were discussed, so that you have to assign cost of proper GL to do the proper reporting to the standards. But asset accounting systems are good at what they're good at. They don't do a great job when you start to try to manage the work, right? So work management solutions are deployed. That's where field workers would have the work orders, collect the work they're doing. If there's any changes, they'd be recording it there. It's really capturing maintenance and history. That's where you're going to be doing your failure reporting, developing your FEMAs, et cetera. Another component of the network is asset performance. So once you understand what work has to happen, what the condition of those assets are, we can start to do some performance analysis against that asset. So this is where you're going to start to collect real world data sets. That's where IO and edge computing systems will be collecting data. These are asset performance functions. This is where you're going to be developing your probability of failures and the consequences of those failures for those assets. Those asset performance functions are going to trigger inspections, and really give you a sense of the performance of that asset. Really what you're trying to do with asset performance solutions is understand condition, performance reliability, health indices, so the true condition of the asset, and most importantly, the risk of that asset. So once you have that information, and you can actually then start to do investment planning activities. And you can start to change your capital plans, your capital budgets, your maintenance budgets against those assets, knowing what work has to happen and what risk there is if you move and change what work happens to those assets over a period of time. It is a kind of a stacked journey, right? You really do need those IoT devices. So this is kind of combining an ISA 95 approach to technology stacks to the asset intelligence elements. You're going to be displaying and visualizing data, usually on an HMI or some kind of DCS or PLC system, giving operators that real-time data set and their maintenance teams real-time data sets and visualizations, control functions, etc. You might have some dedicated online condition monitoring solutions that are specific for a piece of equipment. They might even generate work. You might even initiate inspections based off of that information. That technology can start to eat the lunch of work management solutions. More sophisticated organizations will have that work management solution that is in an enterprise-wide system, where reliability teams now are starting to use those systems and look at those data sets. The next layer onto that, where your planning teams get involved, and is around the performance management, where you're going to start to move what work is done to optimize the performance and the costs of those. And the asset investment planning is a longer term look at, okay, how do I plan my budgets over a 5-year period? What's the order of it? What happens if it changes? Lots of scenario planning, etc. So that's the kind of the elements that we look at when we think about asset management programs. And it is integrating asset and asset performance management together. If you're looking at time-based type of operations, there's lots of independent software vendors out there that do this type of activity. SAP, Maximo, IPS, there's lots of them out there. Hexagon is another one, and they really are taking those data from ERP systems. That's usually where scheduling is done for the work. There's some mobile device connection for operators to connect it. So that, again, that's a connected worker into your work management solutions, and they're really trying to drive and manage OPEX costs against your assets. As you get a little bit more sophisticated in the organization, you want to move towards condition-based monitoring. The functional requirements of your solution dives into, okay, what data can I collect against those assets? You need to start, again, developing this probability of failure and consequence of failure curves. You need to do the root cause analysis, and develop all your FMAs against your assets, et cetera. Really what you're trying to do in the next step of that asset performance journey is condition-based maintenance. And it allows you to do a little better asset performance planning and asset investment planning based on that condition. What's happening is you're developing condition modifiers. So as condition is changing, you're actually changing the work that you do against those assets. More inspections based on condition, or other maintenance work against that asset based on those condition modifiers. That's the client example I'm going to give today. That's as far as they have gotten in their asset management journey. You can continue that asset management journey and move more towards reliability-centered maintenance programs. This is where you really start to apply those data analytics and technologies and digital twins and really understand and deeper dive into condition or performance with those technologies. And this is really where you can start to prioritize condition against the consequences of failure and develop your risk matrices. And with that risk management and reliability-centered maintenance intelligence, you can then apply those risk modifiers against the work that you've done, changing the work based off of other parameters that you've developed in that analysis, in that more sophisticated analyses. You tie all of this together, you can really get strategic around developing your OPEX budgets and do that scenario planning of risk against condition. And that too will then have strategic and budget modifiers to the work that you're going to do. So it needs to be connected back into your work management system and drive the work. It often will automatically update scheduling, updating resources against the work, etc. So that's how it all kind of connects together. So this is the journey that we took our MARTA client on. So MARTA is the Metropolitan Area Rapid Transit Authority, and they've gone on a journey of upgrading their fleet. So they're bringing in an entire new fleet of rail cars onto their network, our CQ400 rail cars. Very sophisticated pieces of equipment, lots of data sets available on the cars, and they're looking at all of the infrastructure that's required to pull that data set off of the cars and get it into their work management solutions and into their asset performance solutions to understand the condition of these assets. What their worry was what does their asset intelligence network look like? Can it and will it support that goal or that sophistication? They really want to move towards that reliability-centered maintenance program for these new fleet of cars. So Hatch was engaged to do that review of their existing asset management program and the technology stacks that support that program, and what's their asset intelligence network look like. We take an IPSECA approach when we do this analysis. IPSECA is really quite simple. It's just the acronyms for identifying work, what work needs to happen, the planning stage of that work, how are they scheduling that work, how are they executing on that work, how do they close the work, and how do they analyze that work that's done, because the work that is done often will impact the actual asset condition and improve either the condition health indice or manipulate or change the probability of failure curve because of the work that was done. So it's very impactful to understand and analyze the work that is completed. There's also a continuous improvement loop that we look at and understand the upsets within that network. You know, how do emergency breakdowns, et cetera, apply to the actual program? Do they have all of their maintenance plans in place? Have they completed all their work procedures, et cetera? How does it work with their operational plans when asset condition reaches certain thresholds, et cetera? And how does the financial plan, how they do their asset accounting within that system? our assessment process for this client, we went through and understood what the key requirements of the program were going to be. What did the cars need? What do each of the domains within the organization need? And what requirements of a modern work management solution, what would that need to support the program? We did the current state analysis through workshop sessions with with the client, and we did a mini review of some of the findings that we gathered during those processes. We identified many small pieces of software that they were using as part of the network that they didn't realize they were using. We took a really deep dive into their existing EAM solution, making sure that it was aligning to the existing capabilities, the existing maturity levels of the people within the organization, and the requirements that we had started to develop for the program. From there, we actually developed the fit and the gap analysis of the existing software technology stacks, but also their business processes and also the people that were using those business processes. And then very quickly discovered some challenges within that architecture and within those systems and with some of the people using the application, and delivered a final report to support the changes that they would have to do to really deliver a robust, holistic work management solution. There's quite a bit to this. We identified 787 requirements, and through that analysis quickly discovered that there was a lot of fit, but there was also fit, but with some gaps. A cumbersome way to do and deliver the work processes, very cumbersome way to visualize it. Some visualizations that weren't there that could be there. So again, we said, fit, but there were still some gaps. And then we did identify some fairly significant gaps they would have to fill to really implement the solution set. And then there were several that were not addressed. We didn't dive into everything. Like, we didn't get into some of their work permitting requirements or their safe isolation requirements that are part of a workflow or as part of a work procedure. There is opportunity for them to review that and integrate those systems with their work management solution, but that was out of scope for this client opportunity. It's probably something we'll return to with them. The gap assessment, we tried to keep them very focused, so we really narrowed it down to some top issues. So we identified the 3 top gaps, the 3 top pros of the systems, and what we saw as barrier to adoption for some of those, and also dived real deep into if the current system couldn't do it, are there applications out there that could? So we went through that process with this client, and we took it from kind of the rail car maintenance overview. This organization also has bus and a bus program, so we did this holistically for the organization. The requirements of that domain are a little bit different than rail car, but we took that same approach for all of the domains so that everybody had a contribution to understand where they are, where they want to go, and how they need to get there. And we did that for their inventory groups, their actual asset management program as a whole. We dove deep into their financials and inventory control systems, and how finance is actually costing inventory, etc. We certainly identified some challenges for them that they're going to have to overcome. We did discover that data flow, that asset intelligence network that we described, that there wasn't full integration. There wasn't bi-directional integration. Great example is their ERP system was supposed to be, or they thought was, the system of record, but they discovered that it was a manual intervention in between the integration between the ERP and their work management solution. So it was uncovered that there was 2 systems of record. People were putting the data sets into the ERP system, pushing that to the work management solution. There was an injection where manually they accepted or moved that data into the work management solution. So it was a manual configuration of the work management solution. And what was happening was not everything was being put in properly, or sometimes wasn't being put in properly, or sometimes information was being put into the work management solution that didn't come from asset accounting. So there's a disconnect between the system of record, but disconnect between the asset hierarchy and asset registry in the ERP and the asset hierarchy in the asset registry within the work management solution. They also discovered that within the supply chain, there was different hold points and product acceptance work processes that didn't align between those two systems. So again, causing some grief, they didn't trust some of the data, that there was a lack of confirmation of the core items that were coming in. There were pieces of equipment that weren't properly tracked within either the costing system or the work management solution. The other challenge was adoption, and they really were reliant on 4 or 5 different super users. People within this organization, people using these systems, were only using it for their one specific task and didn't have that holistic look at why they were doing what they needed to do. And we quickly discovered that there were other things that they should be doing that weren't part of their workflow or their processes to really properly use the technology stacks to deliver the program. So those were some other challenges that we uncovered for this client. And the real goal here is higher work management maturity translate into lower mean downtime. These are some of the real drivers of why you do this stuff. The how is important, but always have to keep in mind the how combined with the why. There's also some maturity opportunities for this client to improve this asset intelligence network. They're looking at a long-term approach for rail cars. They're looking at maybe either additional modules to their existing solution or a new solution. So we're helping them go through that understanding, do the comparatives, support the go-to-market activities for that analysis. They're looking at the improvement of those integrations that we talked about, better integration between their ERP systems and their work management solutions, but the actual adoption of some asset performance functionality where we're looking at integrating some of the spreadsheet type work they were doing around asset performance and inspections, integrating that much better into the work management solution to automate that process, to eliminate some of those disparate little programs and workflow functions that they were doing to deliver the work management program. So there's opportunity there for better integrations with and cleanup of some of the solution sets that they were using. And also, they didn't do a very good job of visualizing some of that information. So the visibility of the organization into some of those functions, they didn't have some of the dashboards that they need. They didn't have some of the critical reporting that they needed against both EAM and APM and AIPM. So that's something that we've identified for them for areas of improvement. And their goal really is this best in class but fit for purpose solution that aligns with not only the ISO 55000 requirements from a holistic perspective, from a framework perspective, but this assets intelligence network to make sure that the technology stacks that they're using to deliver that program really are well suited and cohesive for their organization. So it's been quite a journey with this client. There's still lots of work to do with them. They're excited about the future and the implementation of this asset intelligence network as a whole, and they understand the work that's involved to actually deliver that. We've completed that discovery session. We're moving towards vendor identification and or module identification within the existing vendor over the next few months. We're really diving deep into development of their workflows and the integration of more optimized workflows between the different domains, a better job around data integration, data collection, and some information management planning, understanding what information they have, what information they need, who needs that information, and when do they need that information against that technology stack. So better workflow processes, better data ownership and governance, and how to use that information across that network. And then installation of the couple of new modules that were identified with their existing solution, or a move towards their a new solution if that's the decision they take. And then you're looking at 12 to 16 months of configuration. So there's no easy button here. There's a lot of work that's involved with improving their asset management network and their asset management program. And we expect, once in place, there's a lot of change management processes, a lot of training, a lot of iterative use, even an agile process for improving the configuration of the system over a period of time. So, full rollout of that program is planned for another 15 months. So we're looking at probably a year and a half for full implementation of the system. Marta's very excited about it. I think they're one of the leading operators within the North American market when it comes to asset management, and we're really excited about working with them. And with that, I'm finished.
Thank you very much, John, for that insightful presentation. I think I was quite intrigued by your safety moments. And yeah, I really think it's amazing though to hear how technologies have advanced in asset management. And also thank you for sharing your approach that you've taken in order to successfully deliver to your clients. So with that, we will now go straight into our question and answer session. To the attendees, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box, and then we will take it from there. I haven't seen any questions yet. Godfrey, if you can help me just to man the question and answers.
Okay, we'll do Amanda. So far, I think we have no questions.
I think we did a great job in presentation. So
I think you wowed our audience.
Well, I think Ndale and myself, I think we're both passionate about this. So I think we put a lot of information in front of the audience there. So what I find is people need to digest this, and they'll probably come back to you with a million questions. So always available to have that conversation.
Thank you, John.
Okay, Amanda, here's the question for Andile. How do you measure and monitor value across the asset life cycle? John can also maybe answer after Andile. Measure and monitor the value across the asset life cycle.
Sorry, what was the question again? I didn't quite understand. What?
How do you measure and monitor value across the asset life cycle?
How do you measure? Okay, there's many different locations across the value chain that you can measure value. One of the metrics is number of open work orders, number of closed work orders, the time to close work orders. You can set benchmarks against what you expect the time to be for that work activity, and start to track and collect those data sets. With a digitized and very connected and integrated work management solution, you'll have great insights onto the resources that are working on that, how long they're taking, and you start to report on those metrics. And over time, you'll find that those metrics you'll start to see come down. You get better connectivity with your workers. They have the information more readily at hand. You're more prepared with spares. You'll actually see what you think it takes to do the work start to come down, because you're actually, number one, monitoring how long it's taking you to do that work accurately. You'll actually see performance improvements as they use the system, because it's more optimized and information more readily at hand. That's one way to measure the performance improvements, or measure the value. I'm sure there's several others. Actually, I know there's many others we could get into, but Andile, do you have an example?
Yeah, look, I think it's linked to my response is basically linked to what you said. So essentially, I think as a starting point, you want to build your asset data. You want to know what assets you have, what their components are and subcomponents are. So that when you then you know what the useful lives of those assets are, the estimated useful lives, and when the replacement of those assets or those subcomponents would happen, as well as when those maintenance tasks would happen. So you want to be able to build your asset data and also identify your asset components, the value of those various asset components as and when you replace them and bring them on board. And then you monitor and check that the value of those few elements from a financial perspective, but also from a maintenance perspective. You want to be able to, whenever you do any overhauls, changes, or upgrades of any component or sub element of your asset, be able to know which component or element you removed and replaced and what the value of that sub element is. So I'd say what's quite critical, besides the work management functionality, is to be able to build your asset data up and fully break down your assets into the adequate level of components to be able to report on the various activities and the elements that define value for your assets throughout their life
Yeah,
cycle.
100% agree. A carry on of that too is that once you have that hierarchy and understand the impact of assets, how the costs and influences of each component rolls up into the collection of that hierarchy. Great example is of a machinery. The machinery as a whole has an asset value, and then the components within it have an asset value. As the lower components start to degrade, you roll that up. Your actual value of your machinery is starting to degrade over time. The other place to visualize value and capture value is in that condition-based maintenance approach, right? If you can move away from time-based towards condition-based, if you have the work procedures in place, if you have the systems in place to understand what the probability of failure and consequences of failure are. Once you're there, doing that condition-based maintenance, you'll be able to do a little less maintenance on the device because you're doing maintenance just based on condition. And if you want to go to the next step to really pull value out of it, is that predictive, is dive in a little sooner or later to do maintenance because you really understand that there's going to be a problem coming up, right? So the value is driven in, number one, having the data, number two, understanding where the data needs to go. So a good asset hierarchy and the system of record and the configuration of your work management solutions, and then ideally a real good grasp of your probability and consequence of failure so you can optimize that work against that asset.
All right, thank you so much, John and Andile, for answering that question in such great detail. We have another question here from Onalena in the chat box. She says, good day. What is the people, process, and technology strategy balance in new assets in a business? And what would typically be the approach? I don't know if you want to answer that, John.
I'll start, sure. That's a great question, but it's a big question. The people, process, and technologies part is spread across the entire asset intelligence network. So there's the people and process and technologies that are used by your financiers, your accounting teams, your asset accounting program. Then there's that people, process, and technology part of your reliability teams and your planning teams and your actual maintenance teams. And then there's that people, process, technology part of the team really looking at asset performance and condition, et cetera. And it's critical to understand the business processes and the training requirements and the maturity requirements of the people in each of those parts of the network, but as well, how do they work together? So it's about workflow as well. So it's how do the people between those different parts of the intelligence network work together? How do they use the technology? Where's the division of responsibility? You have to look at your data governance policy. Who's responsible for the data? Because sometimes the data owner might have to put the data in two locations or spread it across that asset intelligence network. So it's also a governance program. So again, it's an information management planning activity to understand the asset information lifecycle over that network, and then all of the individual people, process, and technology requirements with each part of that intelligence network. So it's a huge question. It's part of the big challenge of deploying a very robust and integrated asset management system. Typically, the approach on doing that is that initial discovery session, understand your current state and maturity level of not only your people, your processes, and technologies, but what your future state, your goals are around people, processes, and technologies. Is it aligned to 55,000? Do you have all the elements required? And then you look into, okay, how do we get there? What's the roadmap to get us to the maturity level we need? And you don't have to be super mature in all of the functions. You just have to understand what the need is of the future state.
All right, thanks, John. Andile, do you have anything to add with that point?
Look, I think John covered it really well. So I think it's a line of sight question. So once you've built your various organizational elements in to support and enable your asset management function, then the processes and technology and the people will then come around. So typically from an asset management elements perspective, you're looking at it with regards to your asset portfolio. You have to manage the organization at a global scale, and then your asset management function basically comes in as how you then try and realize value from the assets, and then you then build that asset management system, which becomes the various interrelated activities to establish your asset management policy, objectives, and processes to achieve the various organizational objectives. Now, once you're now building that asset management system, you then bring the people, the technology, and the processes together around your asset portfolio, depending whether you're a mining operation or you are purely an IT firm or you are a manufacturing operation. So then those processes and the people then come in right around your assets and your asset management functionality as the asset management system to then meet the overall organizational objectives and functions, and ultimately leading to how you then manage the entire organization. So it's like John said, it's a quite a broad question, but it ultimately speaks to how you develop your asset management system around your asset portfolio. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Moving on to our next question from Anonymous. I think, Andile, you can take this one. How do you think AI will impact or affect asset management?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So one of the things that we are dabbling around with in our organization is we're building an asset management solution that is driven around models. So we've built these models that pick up what John was saying around condition. So you want to, for instance, make decisions around the status of your assets and condition of your assets. And we've built models that work based on picking up these various elements around the assets. So I think artificial intelligence is going to really play a big game around all of that, and the appropriate models around how that intelligence works and how it functions is something that's really going to be a game changer and effects that's going to play out in the asset management industry. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, I'm going to pile on just a little bit there too. We're using and seeing a lot of AI type models and tool sets being used not only for asset condition assessments, but operational understanding. So the actual physical modeling of a process, and how does the change in that process actually impact assets and asset condition? So it's not just the condition of the assets and influences on that assets. What's the whole process looking like on that condition, right? So that's where AI is starting to look at many different data sets and what impact it might be having on that asset.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. 100%. Okay, John, if I can start with you on the next question. Is there a typical ratio of the cost to install the asset management system to the value of the assets? I.e., what should we expect to spend on these types of systems? That question is from David.
Okay, that's a really loaded question. it is based on the size and complexity and maturity level of your organization. You do need to right fit the technology stacks and your asset management program. I think even small organizations should take that ISO 55000 approach and make sure they have all of those elements addressed. So that's a component of the delivery of an asset management program that you should look at. So you have to account for those costs from a technology stack, make sure it's right sized for you, and you can go from the hundreds of thousands of dollars for full implementation to the millions of dollars for full implementation. If you're a larger organization, and I'll say take Maximo as an example, you're probably at about 2.5 million, and I'm going to give that in US dollars for a full implementation of that system across your entire asset hierarchy. Now, you don't have to complete this program for every asset and all of your asset classes. You can get very specific and take a crawl, walk, run approach to the deployment of that solution, right? So you can reduce those costs to get the ball rolling, really get your program in place, start to address your more critical assets, and then slowly over time build out that database for all of your assets. So you can reduce that cost and the implementation costs, and spread that over a little bit longer period of time. So that often helps organizations overcome that cost burden. But that's kind of the marker that you're looking at for costs of implementation of a very robust EAM/APM solution set. Some other costs that people often skip over and it needs to be addressed is migration or integration of existing solutions into the new package. You're going to be obsoleting many of the systems that you might have in place when you go down that route. So there's some cost recoveries that need to come into play as well, right? You're going to save money by not using some of those other systems. And then the other cost you have to think about is the change management process. I don't think people and organizations put enough effort or account for the cost of change. So it is around training, and it is around good mentors within the application. It's about having sprinkled in some super users within the different domains so that you get better adoption. And there's some costs associated with that outside of the implementation of those systems. So something else that you want to consider when you're looking at the costs of the implementation.
Thank you, John. Andile?
I think if I can add to that as well. One thing that we've observed in the market is organizations tend to go for a certain solution because it's a leader or it's quite good, but it then doesn't conform, it then doesn't meet their requirements. So I think
Correct.
one thing that's quite critical is customization, and it then cuts down on that change management need and also that integration. So while organizations have built over time, say you have a digital asset register, you have your work management function that you've been playing around with on Excel, make those as critical inputs to the software or the asset management system that you then make use of, because you already have some functionality that you've built around that, and that is quite customized to your organizational function. The customization is quite a critical thing. It's one thing to spend, I think the SPA story currently, where the CFO had to be let go because they spent about 2 billion rand on, almost 1 billion rand on a SAP implementation that failed. So it's quite critical to get a system that can really meet your needs and be well adaptable and applicable to your individual organizational needs, whilst complying to best practice and the various compliance frameworks as well. Thanks.
Well put. I agree 100% on that one.
All right, thank you. We have another question from Nico, and they ask, can the effectiveness of implementing an asset management system for an organization be measured by quantifying the savings achieved? For instance, how can one calculate the percentage of savings on maintenance resulting from the implementation of such a system?
Return on investment is always a challenge. number one is, what are you spending now? So often organizations don't have that information to start with. So what's the baseline? How do you measure, and where are you measuring from at the start? So that's certainly a challenge. You really have to be honest with yourself, spend a little bit of time and money in understanding what you're doing now, how long that's taking you, what impact does that have on your organization, and then there's ways to do that analysis to help build that business case for implementation. We understand the implementation cost, but we also have a pretty good understanding from deploying solution sets many times how much time you can save around searching for information, how much time you can save based on the reliability of that information, time you can save by having proper integrations and near real-time integrations between parts of that asset intelligence network. We can quantify those kinds of savings. Where it gets more difficult to capture that return on your investment is some of the softer costs is once your people become more comfortable using it, what was their improvement in their workflow, improvement in how they use the systems. That gets a little harder to measure, but you do see it in the outputs, right? So you're going to start to see the actual cost reductions of maintenance over a period of time. Again, ideally, you would have some historical information that you use as a baseline to show that improvement, but that's how we approach it.
Yep. And I think you have to pick, as you're saying, John, that you have to pick the right KPIs that you measure your performance on, be it your inventory cost, how much your inventory stock amount is. An optimized approach towards critical spares management can significantly reduce that cost, and that's one way to check. You can also link that to your downtime and availability of various equipment that is quite critical to your entire overall process. So, for instance, if you're a batch processing factory that designed to produce 2,500 units of a product per hour, and based on poor maintenance practices, you're doing at 1,500, an improvement in that to your design target can show you how you are improving, how you're doing. In some instances, you can also check based on how much you're spending on your overtime, because it shows that your staff is spending a lot of time dealing with breakdowns and dealing with machinery downtimes, etc. So you have to then pick the various KPIs that you can use to monitor and measure what improvements are there. So it's a lot of things that you can look at. You can look at your downtimes, your equipment availability, mean times between failures, mean times to repairs, etc. But yeah, there are various ways to track how you've improved and what cost savings have been achieved through implementation of best practice asset management. Thanks.
Thank you so much for answering those questions to both our speakers. I don't see any more questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box, so we'll be going once, going twice.
I was impressed with the questions, so thank you, audience, for paying attention.
Yeah, and thank you. I think for me, it was just, your depth of knowledge in your field. And also, I think for both of you and Andile, I think you're very passionate about what you do. And, thank you for sharing that with us today. We really, really appreciate that.
It's our pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
So yes, thank you for giving us all that insight. And also thank you to everyone who asked questions today. So if we don't have any more, I'd like to just ask anyone who has any further questions to send them through to godfrey@cesa.co.za, and he'll be able to link you up with our panelists. And then also, I think the presentations will be made available via the CESA website or via CESA. You can also contact Godfrey for those. And with that, Godfrey, if there's nothing else to add, you'll allow me to close this session. John, I think it's morning for you.
It's very, very early morning. I'm actually in Vancouver, Canada this week. So
yeah, about 5 a.m.
No, it's 3 a.m.
3 a.m. Wow.
I'm on the Pacific time, but that's okay. We just stayed up really late. I
All
call
right,
it a late night and not an early morning.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to present to us. And yeah, you have a great day ahead. And thank you,
All right, thank
Andile,
you.
for your presentations as well. So I wish everybody a very safe festive season and a fruitful 2024. Thank you for attending and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much.